How do you translate passion into sales? Today, I'm answering a question from an Instagram follower. I regularly ask you guys for your questions, and today's question is so good, I wanted to dedicate the whole episode to it. Welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 217 with me, Tara Swiger. You'll find the show notes and links to everything we talked about at taraswiger.com/podcast217. You'll also find a free worksheet there if you scroll down and put your name in the box at the bottom. You'll get that free worksheet. So on Instagram, I asked for your questions, and IMD asks, and we link to her in the show notes too. She says, I'm scared to ask, but here goes. I'm a crocheter and I am proud of what I do, but it doesn't seem to translate into sales. How can I change this for my business? Well, so I had told her in the meantime to check out the marketing podcast episodes I've already done, because that's basically what she's asking about is marketing. So I think a lot of times we miss that sales come from clear communication, and that clear communication is the person who wants to buy what you sell clearly understands, because you communicated it, what is special about your work and how it will serve her needs. That's where sales come from. Think about everything you've ever bought. It's because you've understood that the need you have, that thing you're going to buy, it fills that need. And you understand that because it was communicated to you. Right? It was communicated either with words, with images, with recommendations from other users. It was recommended, you realize that because it was under the Amazon people who bought this also bought thing. It became clearly communicated to you because you were scrolling through Instagram and it was an ad you saw or as a post by somebody that you follow. Something about it communicated, hey, you have this need. This is the thing that fills that need. That's how sales happen. So if you have that in mind, it becomes a little easier to figure out how you translate what you care about into an actual sale. It's your job to make that connection. A, it's your job to find the person who needs or wants what you're selling. And then B, it's your job to communicate so they pass over that gap in understanding between their need and your product. That's how you make that happen. Now, every podcast episode I've ever done about marketing is about this. It is either about finding your right person, communicating with your right person, speaking the words that your right person will understand, identifying her needs. I'm going to link up as many of those as I can find. There's over 200 episodes of this podcast, so there's a lot of them. I'm going to link them up in the show notes so you can go back and listen. Depending on how you're listening, you can search for the podcast episodes. So you can go to my site and just search the word marketing in the search bar of taraswiger.com. The search bar is over on the right-hand side. You can also go to iTunes if you listen in your podcast app, search your podcast app, open up my podcast, and then there's a search bar, search marketing. You can also, depending on how you're listening or what podcast app you're using, search there. If you're on YouTube, you can search my channel. That's going to pop up all the times I talked about this, because that's really what it is. Marketing is clear communication with a person who wants to buy your thing. So, even though I talked about this a lot, I realized maybe I haven't put it all together step by step by step. So, remember, your job is to find the person who wants a thing, communicate with her, and close that gap so she understands how it fills her need. So we're going to go through this one by one, but before we do, I want you to remember there are a bunch of needs. So in my book, Market Yourself, and in my classes that I teach about this, we always talk a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow, he's a psychologist. He came up with this concept of how we move through our needs as we grow in safety and security, and this totally applies to anything that you're selling. Because we often think about needs as basic physical needs like clothing, shelter, food. Most of us, our handmade business doesn't fill those needs. But the next level, after you get clothing, handmade clothing, after you get clothing, safety, your home, a roof over your head, your food, your next set of needs are a needs of belonging and security and feeling safe. And a lot of times your handmade good does speak to that need. When I buy a crocheted hat from Made by Me, it makes me feel like I belong to the people who are buying her hats. And she does these really awesome character-based hats. So maybe you get a hat that looks like a minion. And then it makes me, if I'm a 7-year-old, feel like I am belonging with the other 7-year-olds who love Minions. And like we all belong together because we're all into Minions. You get how like a hat can make them feel that sense of belonging. Also, it can make you feel like you belong to the handmade community. When you're buying handmade, often you're doing it because you want to express that that's who you are and that you belong to that community. And actually, the next level of needs that your thing might meet is self-expression and creativity. The things that I put in my house and the things that I put on my body express something about who I am and what groups I belong to. So your handmade good might be your sense of self-expression, but it also might be somebody else's sense of self-expression. This is especially true if you design knitting or sewing patterns. You're helping the person who buys your thing express themselves. We actually talked about this on the last time I answered questions on the podcast a couple episodes ago. So your thing can fill all kinds of needs. So don't tell yourself, don't believe that you don't fill needs by making what you make. So the question is, once you accept that you fill a need, how do you clearly communicate that to the people who want to buy it? Now, before we go further, you got to know this is a lifelong process. You're going to get better and better at each step of this as you go if you keep working on it. But you have to keep working on it. The main thing is just start working on it now. Take time to think it through now. And then keep paying attention as you go. Pay attention to what your customers say to you. Pay attention to what kind of person buys your thing, what she's into, why she says she's buying it, how she's going to use it. So this absolutely takes time the first time you do it. You need to set aside time to really think about it. This is why I've included so many worksheets in my book, Market Yourself. And this is also why I put this in classes, because classes create the structure and the ongoing process that you need to really work through this. I'm going to talk about the 4 points here in this podcast episode, but it takes most people who work through this several weeks to work through all 4 steps. So it's okay if you don't have it all settled in the next 10 minutes. So number 1, identify the person that your work is for. Remember I said your job is to clearly communicate to that person? You need to identify who that person is. How does she use your thing? What stage of life is she in? What is she wanting to do with it? Is she wanting to express herself? Is she wanting to feel great? Is she wanting to take care of herself? Is she wanting to be funny? What is she doing with your product and how is she doing it? That's what I mean when I say identify who the person this is for. You might know demographics, you might know where she lives, how much money she makes, how old she is, if she has kids or not. That's helpful. But what is she doing with the thing? Right? Like how and why does she have this need right now? What is she hoping to communicate by using your thing? That's what you got to figure out. The second thing you got to figure out is once you know who she is, you need to talk directly to her. In your Instagram posts, in your shop descriptions, in whatever you do, you should be talking to this person. So Ida, I noticed that you're a crocheter, and this goes for everybody who's listening. If your posts are talking to other crocheters, you are likely not going to increase your sales, because other crocheters aren't going to buy your finished crochet goods. Now, if you're a designer who designs for crocheters, then yes, it makes total sense to talk to other crocheters. And this is actually a problem that so many handmade people have in the beginning, is that they're talking to other people who do what they do, and those aren't their customers. And so they find that no matter how much their following grows, or how many people they have on their email list, or how many likes they have on their Etsy product, they don't have sales because those are other crocheters, say, liking what they're doing. That's not helpful in sales. So you need to talk directly to the person who's going to buy what you sell, who is usually not a person who makes what you make. Now, the third thing is you need to get clear about how your work serves her need. Remember, we're closing that gap in between her and your product. So in order to close that gap, you need to think, okay, this is a need this person has when she buys it. This is a want, a desire she has. How can what about my thing fills that need? And then you need to communicate it. Communicate it in your Instagram post. Remember, you're talking directly to her and you're talking about how your thing helps. So I help people get essential oils that are going to help their well-being, their self-care, their emotional health. If I just talked about what an essential oil is and I didn't tie it into how they're going to use it in their life, it wouldn't be that helpful. The same is true of your crocheted thing or whatever it is that you're making, or your designs or your services. You want to make sure you're talking about the need they have and how your thing fills that need. So in my book, Market Yourself, there's lots of worksheets to help you figure this out, what makes your work special, how to communicate that, how to speak in the language of your customer so she understands what you're saying, because you want to make sure that you're talking about what she cares about. For example, she does not care what stitch you use because she's not a crocheter. She wants to know why you made that decision. What does that stitch do for her? How does that stitch make your hat or your bag better? That's what you want to focus on. That's what I mean when I say talk directly to her and talk about what she cares about. And then the last step is you want to have a way of keeping her coming back. You want to keep connecting with her. So if somebody spots you on Instagram because you're using a hashtag and you're using hashtags aimed at your right person, the person who's going to buy from you, she can follow you. And that's how she's going to keep seeing your stuff. Now, a little side note, she'll keep seeing your stuff if she actually engages with your photos. So you want to make sure your photos and your descriptions ask her questions or invite her to engage, because Instagram is then going to realize she wants to see your work and is going to show her more of it. So that's one way she can follow you. But say she goes to your Etsy shop and decides not to buy today. What else can she do other than your Etsy shop? An easy answer is she can sign up to get email updates from you, and then once a month you send her updates on what you've added to your shop, what's new, what you're learning, how it's filling her need. That will keep her in your loop so you keep communicating. Because the thing a lot of us forget is when you sell a handmade thing and it's going to be more higher end, it's going to cost more because of your time and energy and art that went into it. People aren't ready to buy high-end things at the drop of a hat unless you've already built trust. So yes, if you've been building trust over time with your Instagram posts and your blog posts or your emails, and then you launch a new thing or you offer a new product, people might jump on it then because you've been building trust. But if I just find you and I click through your Etsy shop, how can you build trust with me? You've got to keep me in the loop and start building that trust. So then when you make an offer down the road, we already have that relationship. That's where I really, really like an email list for regularly communicating and connecting with somebody. When they're not ready to buy on day 1, you keep them around for day 30 or day 60 when they will be ready to buy. So those are basically the steps of turning your passion into sales and turning your excitement for what you're doing into clear communication with your right person. So I want to say it again. When I talk about marketing, when my book's about marketing, my posts are about marketing, I have worksheets about marketing, marketing is clearly communicating with a person who wants to buy what you're selling. That's all I mean by marketing, is clear communication to the right people. So I mentioned those are a lot of steps. It takes time. I walk you through all of these steps in a class that hasn't been available for a long time called Elevate Your Business, and I do it inside the Starship. So I'm making changes to my business. You might have noticed on Instagram I did a couple posts about how I'm pruning stuff back. So now all of my classes are only available within the Starship because I've realized that that's how they're most effective. Those are the people that get the biggest transformation. So why have a lot of things available in their not most valuable state? And the most valuable state of my classes and me and my help is within the Starship. So I've actually changed up the Starship so that when you join, you are guided through each step you need to do for the next foundations in your business to increase your sales. So first you identify your goal, then you make a plan, then you get clear on your numbers and profitability and pay yourself, then you figure out your marketing. You figure out who you're talking to, how to talk to her, and I'll also guide you through figuring out how to use your email list and your Instagram account to do that. We go into those tools. The Starship isn't open now, but it opens next month. You can be the first to find out about it. There are going to be limited spots at taraswiger.com/starshipbiz. That'll also be linked up in these show notes. But that is how I am trying to help guide you through doing these steps, because these steps can be overwhelming. These steps can take months. I have talked to many, many students over the years who are like, I'm still working through this. That's the thing. You're always going to be working through this, but you can get ongoing help and guidance from me and an awesome community inside the Starship to help you work through this process. I hope that this helped you get started though. So you start thinking about who your person is and you talk directly to her. Don't wait. Don't wait to start making changes right now to make all the work you're doing more effective. So in the meantime, you can check out my book, Market Yourself, work through these questions and worksheets. That's what Market Yourself is all about. And since I saw you had an Etsy shop, Ida, I'm going to recommend my video, 3 Things to Fix in Your Etsy Shop. I'll link that up in the show notes. That's a video where I go specifically into what people can fix in their Etsy shop. It's a little old, so Etsy might have made some changes, but the foundations of what you're going to want to do in your Etsy shop are the same. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for asking your great questions. You know, you guys can ask me questions. If you follow me on Instagram, I once a month do a Hey, Ask Me Your Questions post. And on Instagram stories now, I'm answering questions almost every day. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a super enthusiastic, sales-filled day.